So, Bloodstained is pretty fun, huh? Okay, but seriously, this game is the one true successor to what Castlevania, well, used to be. Where it ended back in 2007 is where this game pretty much picks right back up. The rebooted series kind of carried the husk of Castlevania to its final resting spot, but the last true game was Order of Ecclesia. Then, 12 years later, Miriam and her crew picked that legacy up, and what a legacy it is. This game takes the best parts of all the predecessors and mashes them into one very dense game. I don't mean dense as in dumb or anything, but dense as in there's just so much stuff. Like, way too much stuff. Big, large, multi-level castle to explore? Check. Exhaustive list of a ton of weapons and abilities? Check. Side quests, character leveling, item crafting, limited character customization, spells, familiars, rare drops, layers of equipment, secrets, everywhere. And that's just one character, in one mode. And that wasn't even everything. This game kind of came out in a strange time. A time where most companies of a AAA or even AA, if you want to go that route for a studio classifier, we're not making these types of games very often, if at all. The indie scene kept this alive for a long time. Much like Nintendo would do in a few years' time with Metroid, the big-time figurehead for Castlevania, one Koji Igarashi, we're going to be calling him Iga from here on out, that's his preferred shorthand anyway, threw down the proverbial wine glass and called for a true return to the gothic castle crawl we all knew and loved. How's it going, everyone? My name's Leon, and I want to welcome you all back to the Castlevania Retrospective EX Bloodstained Edition. Bloodstained. Let me take you back to 2015. Personally, I remember at some point during a day checking out YouTube and I saw a few videos from people and channels that I follow. They posted some kind of reaction to Iga and his announcement trailer. So, naturally, I went and checked out the original video that Iga posted, and what an announcement that was. For longtime Castlevania fans, it had all kinds of throwbacks and references to the original series that he headed for over a decade. Clocking in at a little over 3 minutes long, he not only proposed a new title in the vein of Castlevania, but also kind of threw some shade at the developers at the same time. This was something I never really expected. It came out right around the time where Konami was just bleeding out its best development teams and IPs. Not to derail too hard into the faults of Konami, but once the failure of the rebooted Castlevania Lords of Shadow was cemented, it all but killed the brand for Konami. I never expected to see anything like that again, and to some degree we haven't seen anything new from them in this space, and honestly probably won't for quite some time, if ever. Iga saw this at the time and knew that this was something that people wanted. So, what does a somewhat well-known developer do when ideas are sky high and the money is almost non existent. That's right, it's time to kickstart something. The announcement trailer that IGA put out was for announcing, obviously, Bloodstained as an IP, but also for the Kickstarter campaign. There is a ton to look at here. The plan was ambitious. The money they were looking for was roughly $500,000, which honestly is a decent amount, life-changing for me, and I would imagine a good chunk of you all watching. But in terms of game development, that kinda was, well, not a whole lot. Doesn't matter anyway, this goal was reached and crushed almost immediately. It only took a day, really. It launched back on May 11th of 2015, and was officially funded on May 12th, 2015. Then it was only a matter of time. 1 month later, it hit its final total of $5.5 million. 1 month? That's all it took. As I am not a developer, or really even in the industry, despite my best efforts. But I would like to think that $5.5 million in 1 month is just a little insane, right? That's not even adding in the post-Kickstarter actual game sales, which, as of 2020, the game sold over 1 million units, and at roughly $60-ish a pop, give or take sales, that's a crazy amount of money earned. To say that this game was something people wanted would be an understatement. Was it going to hit the multi-millions sold? No, I don't think that was the overall plan. But it did do exactly what it set out to do, and that was to show that people still wanted a game like this on a higher scale than what most indie devs can provide. The Kickstarter laid out everything it wanted to do, and it had some pretty ambitious stretch goals, things like extra playable characters, voice acting from quite a few well-known voices, extra bosses, extra modes, ports to other consoles. Some of which were cancelled, unfortunately. RIP the PlayStation Vita. And perhaps the best one, a retro-style prequel game. Now, as was the case with some Kickstarter-funded games, they might have bit off maybe a little more than they could chew at the time. Some of the things they were gunning for did not quite make the cut, which is a little unfortunate, as some things they were looking to do would have been pretty awesome. Now, I don't know the intricacies of trying to make something happen on Kickstarter in terms of game development, much less really anything else that you can do on Kickstarter. But given that this game was announced during a time where kickstarting video games was really kind of a hot trend, a lot of folks tend to overshoot what they think they're capable of. Mighty No. 9 is a great example of this. The other example, and perhaps the poster child for all of the Kickstarter games, is Shovel Knight. Now, that's not to say all these games didn't do their best. I'm sure the developers really tried to make what they were trying to make, but sometimes the ambition overshadows what you're actually capable of. Now, IGA, to his credit, having worked in the game industry in the capacity that he did, probably didn't understand everything about the game-making process, which is why so many people were involved in making the game, and maybe some wires got crossed there. But in the end, despite a couple ports not making it, and despite some aspects still not really in the game, but they are working on them, it's impressive to see that for the most part, even almost a decade later, they're still trying to improve and make good on the goals that they set from their Kickstarter campaign. And you can see this because it's still actively getting updated to this day. As per Kickstarter's policies, they had to update the backers as things progressed, and as a fun little aside, they're still updating this page. The last update, as of this recording, happened back in March of 2023. The game itself is still also being worked on and updated. So, while those ambitious plans were announced way back in 2015, 8 years later, they're still working to get those promises fulfilled. It would have been nice if things came out in a more timely manner, but it's crazy that such an extensive list of things is publicly available. Crazier still that they're not only continuing to develop it, but that they're still communicating it. It's just out there, in the open. Honestly, it's pretty great. Getting patch updates on a multiplayer game is somewhat common, but the single-player games, not so much. This game was eventually made by both 505 Games and Artplay. Development started basically right after it was funded, and was really pushed into overdrive once all those stretch goals were met. IGA brought on some pretty high-grade voice actors. People like David Hayter, who was originally set to play Jeeble, but ended up voicing Zangetsu instead. You might remember him from Metal Gear. He's Solid Snake and Big Boss.
It's Snake.
They also brought on Robbie Belgrade. That name might not be super familiar to you, but if you played Castlevania Symphony of the Night, you might recognize him as Alucard.
Indeed.
Yeah, that's right. They brought back some old school talent. They also got some other Castlevania alums involved. Michiru Yamane, who composed a ton of Castlevania music. Seriously, if there is a song that you like from Castlevania, there is a solid chance that she was a part of it in some way, shape, or form. They also brought on Ippo Yamada, who worked on tons of Mega Man and other Capcom games, to also help produce some music. And of course, we had Iga and his design overall, having started in a lead role back during Symphony of the Night. And they also brought on Ayami Kojima, who you might recognize as the artist that provided a ton of art for Castlevania back in the day. Minus the originals, of course, and, well, the weird brief turn they took into a more anime aesthetic. But if you look at some of those Castlevania posters, odds are that's her work. Some of those Kickstarter pledges were wild, ranging from getting a copy of the game, fairly standard, to going on a whirlwind adventure in Japan with Iga, and so much more in between. You want a personalized message from either Robbie or David? You got it. You want your pet to be an enemy in the game? Or how about a handcrafted silver ring made by Iga himself? So many things people signed up for. All the portrait enemies were backers of a certain degree. That's right, all those paintings you destroy are people. And a very large demon dog or cat is somebody's pet. So much went into making this thing. It's so wild. Check out this Kickstarter page. Just look into it. It's crazy. At some point during the development, after many years actually, the game received a huge graphical overhaul. In fact, Iga made a video for that as well. I thought it looked okay, right? I thought it looked alright at first. But after the change, man, that is night and day. He took that criticism well. Like I mentioned a little while ago, if you really want to get a full deep dive into the real development of this game, take a look at the extensive updates page provided on the Kickstarter. There is a lot to look at and see. Usually, I look into various wikis and scour for interviews and articles, if any exist, to get an idea of what development was kind of like. Not here, though. Primary source is the Kickstarter and all the updates they provide. Lots of rabbit holes to jump down. In the end, as far as Kickstarters go, this is one of the most successful and honest, even with the dropped ports and some goals that are still being worked on. This is a far cry from things like Mighty No. 9 and even Shenmue 3. The only other Kickstarter that comes close and could even surpass it is Shovel Knight. The 2010s were a wild time for things like this. I'm sure there were others that tried, but these were the big ones. Okay, there's a ton to go over here. Like, so much. So, real quick, while I have you here, you know the drill. Like, sub, share, all that fun YouTube stuff. Alright, can I trust you to do that? I'm trusting you to do that. Okay, let's get back to it. Like I said in the beginning, this game is dense. There is so much to talk about here, so let's just jump into it. Let's start with movement. Miriam controls exceptionally well. Not too heavy, not too floaty. Her base jump is just high enough, and with some clever movement you can get into some spots early, but do that at your own risk. You can crouch, slide, backdash, you can jump attack, stand attack, crouch attack, and if you do it right with certain weapons, you can even angle a downward attack. This is not even talking about additional movement abilities, things like double jump, high jump, teleports, and so many other movement type spells, all to help you get around this castle. Want to flip the whole level? You can do that. Certain armor is used to get you around the castle, and Miriam has a ton of just regular movement options to use. Even weapon skills can help you traverse this game. While we're on the topic of weapons, there are Lots. Like, way too many. You can have swords, great swords, daggers, rapiers, spears, clubs, whips, katanas, boots, and guns. Each one of these weapon types has its own model and attack speed value. Each has a fairly clear upgrade path, and during your time exploring the castle, you can and will find secret weapon skills. Most weapons in the game have some kind of ability attached to it. If you spend the time to do that skill, you will master it, and then you can use that ability on any other weapon in that archetype. There are some exceptions, but for the most part this holds true. That said, you can't master, say, a spear skill and then try to do that on a greatsword or mace weapon. It doesn't work like that. Moreover, these skills require you to do Street Fighter-like directional moves. So, you have your standard quarter circle back or quarter circle forward, a Shoryuken style motion, and even some full circle or semicircle things. These moves are pretty powerful, and you can do pretty decent damage with them, but they do drain your MP, so, keep an eye on that. Alrighty then. MP. You will encounter this game's version of spells, the shards, basically immediately. Shards come in a variety of flavors, almost exactly like Soma Cruz from Castlevania. In fact, exactly the same way as Soma Cruz from Castlevania. When you kill a monster, there is a chance that you will get a shard. It will force its way into Miriam and you will gain that power. The types of shards are Conjure, which are red and act as standalone spells or summons, Manipulate, which are blue and changes either you or the surroundings in some way, Directional, which are purple and you can control with the right stick. This game can be played with a keyboard and mouse, but I would highly discourage it. It's a little janky, so, These spells are similar to the Conjure type, but there are a few that allow you to teleport or move in a way that you normally couldn't. Passive shards are yellow and grant certain bonuses to stats and weapons. These also have a special function if you level them up, more on that in a bit. Familiar shards, which are green and allow you to have a buddy fight with you. And finally, skill shards, which are white and allow for additional movement and or other passive-like things. Because this is an action RPG, not only do you get to level up Miriam as a character, but you also get to level up your shards. Each shard has exactly 2 types of leveling. You can upgrade the rank and the grade. Rank upgrades allow for additional properties or abilities. For an example, you can summon more of a thing or improve the attributes of that spell by giving it like a wider AoE or whatever. If you rank up a passive yellow skill shard all the way to rank 9, it becomes an always-on white skill shard. So, let's say for example you pick the luck shard and you rank it all the way up to rank 9. You'll gain a flat bonus for your luck stat at all times now. You can further enhance that stat by just straight up equipping the yellow version of that shard to gain the bonus from equipping that and the flat skill shard. This works well into grades. If you're super into it, you can farm these shards and gain the grade upgrade. Grades also cap out at 9. Doing this might seem a little weird, kind of like a waste, but grinding out grades does increase the overall power of the spell or skill. So going back to that skill shard, getting it to rank 9, like I said, gives you that bonus, but getting it to grade 9 increases the bonus stat. At full grade, the luck shard gives you a plus 10 to the stat, and if you get that to rank 9, you are now getting a flat plus 10 at all times. And if you equip the shard on top of that, you get that flat plus 10 bonus, plus an additional plus 10, totaling a plus 20 to your luck. You can do this for every single yellow shard in the game. Upping the rank and grade of your other favorite spells is great as well, makes them more potent, and able to augment more of your offensive capabilities. Is it worth grinding out the rank and grade for every other shard type? Maybe not. But the spells you use most? Sure. And especially the familiars. Now this transitions very well into item crafting. Yes, item crafting. It plays a huge role in this game. You can and will find some really powerful items and armor out in the castle, but the best items come from the crafting menus. You can and will need items from enemies, lots of items, and the crafting comes in 3 forms. You can craft weapons and armor. That's easy enough. But then you have shard crafting, which does a few things. You can either power up shards to increase the rank, or you can fuse shards to make some new ones. Certain powerful abilities are locked behind this, so don't think you can just kinda skip over it. I mean, you could, but you will definitely have a hard time. Lastly, cooking. Cooking is, well, crafting, but with food items. Now, why do this at all? Well, on top of just being really great for healing, food provides a stat bump for every first food item you eat, and there are a ton of things to eat. So eating a steak for the first time will grant you a permanent stat buff, but every steak after that only heals you. It is in your best interest, though, to try and craft up as many dishes as possible and get as many stat bumps as you can. Just be prepared to do a lot of this. While the crafting is neat and it does wonders for the late game items and stats, some of the requirements for making these things can get a little out there. If you want to and have the patience for it, you will be crafting things like dark matter and gold. No, not money, but alchemic gold. These things require so much time investment and are brutal to try and grind for. I tried to do it for the sake of this video, but if I didn't stop, this video would have taken forever to make. I would still, more than likely, be grinding out these materials. You're gonna need gold as well. No, not alchemic gold, but money. Many things can be bought from the store after you craft them for the first time. This includes food items. This makes crafting certain things that much easier and can help with certain side quests. Side quests! There are many side quests. Most of them are pretty easy. They don't require much from you in the grand scheme of things. You have a few different types of side quests to do. Monster hunts, item returns, cooking, farming, kind of, and finding a lost villager. All of these can be found in the village. Monster hunts are exactly that. You hunt and kill certain monsters. The names on who you're avenging are, well, references. I'll let you figure those out. Just get used to hearing this a lot.
Kill those murderers dead!
Item returns are, well, item returns. You'll need to either find, craft, or hope a drop happens, but once that does, you can return it to this person and get a reward. This old woman here wants food, and lots of it. My advice, if you do this, make the dish, then buy it from the store. Because remember, you get a bonus from the first food item you eat of that type. These are here to try and get you to explore every inch of the castle, and they work pretty well for that. Next up here, you have this missing villager. He pops up from time to time if you keep an eye out for him. He gives a fair amount of cash for each rescue, plus the conversations are pretty funny. Lastly, we have this farming bit here. This isn't really critical, but it does provide a good amount of base cooking materials. During your adventure in the castle, eventually you're probably going to come across OD here. OD is a character that provides books from his personal library. These books can do a bunch of different things. Some boost stats, some boost your attributes. All of them are pretty beneficial to you. The amount of books that you're able to take out and the type of book you're allowed to take out at any given time unlock with how much exploration of the overall castle you do. The more exploration of the castle, the more likely you are to get another book or a more powerful version of a book. Just remember, it's a library, you have to return the books. Otherwise, well, let's just say OD has a very aggressive return policy. Exploring the castle is paramount. There is so much more to this game than first appears. Much like Symphony of the Night, there is a critical path to follow to get the best ending, and you do have to put in a bit of legwork. That is more or less the last aspect of gameplay here. The time you take to find certain items and skills is what will provide the most bang for your buck in terms of how the game plays. How you manage traversal, weapons, gear, skills, and all the mixtures therein is going to dictate your experience. Now, if you're a seasoned Metroidvania player, you're gonna find a lot to like here. Certain spots are only available when you have the right skill or gear. Certain paths are behind false walls and other hidden obstacles, and it's up to you to piece all of that together and figure it out. The castle is like a giant puzzle, and honestly, that's kind of the best part. The combat is fine, the skills are fun to use, but the exploration and the mastery of your abilities the game gives you is where it all comes together. You want my advice on this? Have some loadouts. One for every aspect of the game. Combat, item crafting, luck farming, and anything else you want to try. Let's get into the thick of it now. This version of Bloodstained fits in with all the other Castlevania games that share this particular style. I would say it's better in some aspects. Will it ever replace its predecessors? Probably not. Nostalgia is one hell of a drug, and people will always have their favorites. I don't expect that Bloodstained will ever surpass Symphony of the Night in terms of fondness and the rose-colored glasses people have for it. Don't get me wrong, Symphony is a fantastic game. But this game does everything Symphony does, and more. I would argue that this game is about as close to perfecting the formula as any game can get. Now, that said, it does need some refinement. No doubt this game is maybe just a bit too dense and grindy, but it's still fun all the same. The one thing that Symphony has on this game is its style. Something about the pixels just feels and looks better to me. That's not to say that Bloodstained isn't easy to look at, it certainly is, but it's a preference thing. I think Metroidvania, and I think pixels, you know? Let's take this time to look at some of the extras in this game. All that gameplay stuff was honestly just for Miriam. There are a few other modes and playable characters to experiment with. The first being Zangetsu. If you have ever played almost any Castlevania from Symphony of the Night onward, there's always been some sort of mode called Richter mode. And that is exactly what this is. Play the entire game again as Zangetsu and use all his moves and abilities. This locks you into his weapon and armor. You can't change anything, effectively making this almost like a hard mode of sorts. This mode is for people who might want another challenge. For sure. The whole castle is open and available to you, and the only thing stopping you is yourself. You're gonna have to master his moveset so you can get basically anywhere in the game, within reason. There's going to be some stuff that's just a little off limits due to not having skill shards and the like, but you still might be able to get to places with the right movement tech. Alright, let's say for some reason you don't really want to play as Zangetsu, or Miriam for that matter. Well, Bloodstained has you covered. You want to try another character? Well, at some point, for some reason, Bloodstained added in the main character from Ubisoft's Child of Light, Aurora. She has her own abilities and her own moveset. While she doesn't have shards, she does have sprites to equip and manage, and this adds yet another way to play through this game. I don't really have a whole lot of experience with this. It's something I didn't quite fully dive into, but it might be worth the experimentation at some point, yeah? But we are still not done. Let's say you want to play as one of the human-type bosses. Try the Boss Revenge mode. This lets you play through the game as one of them, if you want. You want more? I don't know how you could, but alright. How about Classic mode, which takes away a bunch of Miriam skills and makes it more like an old-school Castlevania-like? Or how about Boss Rush mode, Speedrun mode, Randomizer mode? That enough modes for you? Do you want more? Well, co-op is supposed to be a thing eventually, both local and online. Do you want even more? Well, I guess just keep an eye out. You never know what Iga has planned next. The sheer amount of things to do in this game is almost too much. Not only does it have all those modes, but it covers the basics extremely well. Once you get a feel for the game and know where things are to an extent, you can begin to test yourself as a player. Try new weapons, synergize your armor and accessories to make the most out of your current loadout. Try to find all those secrets, or maybe even the special weapons. You want to play as a Lily for the whole game? Sure, why not? You can do that. You want to be the ultimate stat monster? Well, I mean, you got your work cut out for you, but it is doable. Are you an achievement hunter? Or a trophy hunter? Well, I got some good news for you if you are. They're fairly easy to get in this game, you know, if you're into that kind of thing. If you do try to hunt down those achievements and trophies, you will see just about everything this game has to offer. You can even carry over everything from your first playthrough onto a New Game Plus file to try and fill out the rest of the stuff you may have missed on your first playthrough. This game has so much to offer you as a player, and if you do want to try it out, I highly encourage you to do it. I guarantee you're going to get your money's worth, especially if you're a fan of this kind of game. Typically, you can grab it for pretty cheap these days, maybe somewhere around the $10 to $15 mark when it's on sale. Highly worth it, especially since they're still updating the game to this day. Alright, so for those of you that haven't quite played this game and you want to keep that mystery alive, go ahead and skip to this timecode here on screen, and or find it in the description down below. For everybody else, here we go. It's story time. So, this game takes place on an alternate reality of Earth in the year 1793. The lore of the game says that the kickoff event actually took place in 1783, but Miriam, the main protagonist, fell into a decade-long magical coma, or some kind of time freeze, so the world changed around her while she slept and remained the same. You see, Miriam and her friend Jeeble were meant to take part in a summoning ritual, as they were the best Shardbinders available. A Shardbinder is a person who had a crystal implanted into them by alchemists. This crystal allows them to use and control demonic powers, but because Miriam had fallen into this deep magical coma, she wasn't able to take part in that ritual, and the summoning was incomplete. That incomplete ritual, however, was just enough to unleash hordes of demons upon the land. Out of all the other Shardbinders, the only other one to survive was Jeeble. He was not as lucky as Miriam, however. He took quite a hit and lost sight of both himself and his humanity. Now, a decade later, and seemingly for almost no reason whatsoever, Miriam has woken up and she is tasked with trying to fix the faults of the alchemists. The game itself begins proper on the Minerva, a large boat that is taking Miriam and her friend Johannes to a town that was suddenly taken out by a horde of demons and had a huge castle pop up basically out of nowhere. Kinda mysterious. Things kick off right away as the boat gets assaulted by a bunch of demons. This boat level acts as the tutorial area and gets you to experiment with Miriam and her abilities. Almost out of coincidence, Miriam runs into Jeeble and the demon Gremory. A small cutscene and boss fight plays out. Upon getting to shore, we meet with Dominique, an exorcist from the church who is here to provide support. She runs the shop and will provide items to you at a cost. Johannes takes up the alchemy lab and makes it so you can craft items and other things. From here, you can meet the various villagers and do the quests they have for you, should you choose. From this point forward, it is castle time. Now, the initial path is fairly linear, as you need to get certain abilities to be able to properly progress. This is going to take you through the main castle halls, the gardens, caves, mechanical libraries, towers, chapels, the whole 9 yards. Just like almost every Castlevania castle, this one has a large amount of areas, up to and including trains and like 3 different flavors of laboratories. It would be prudent to travel to each area and try to get as many shards as possible. Some of them that aren't boss drops are needed to get into certain areas, like this water jet, for example. Be careful on how you progress, as you can very easily just end the game if you enter the room that Jeeble is in too early. We'll get back to him, but just be aware that doing this is gonna end the game and give you the worst possible ending. As you explore the castle, you're going to encounter the other key characters, Zangetsu primarily, who will try to kill you a few times. He is one of the first bosses you can encounter, and if you're not ready for it, he's gonna mess you up. You'll also run into Alfred, who comes off as uninterested in you, almost like he's looking for something, but he will try to stop you if you persist. You're gonna encounter Dominique a few times, weirdly in some labs. It's kind of strange. Strangeness aside, as you explore the areas, you're gonna happen across these bookcases. These are here because apparently this castle was built upon the old alchemist's research facility, and they're gonna have some key story information in these books. Upon first reading, it looks as if it's from Alfred's perspective, but the deeper you delve into the castle, you're gonna find out that these might actually be from somebody else. I'm sure at some point during your exploration you might have noticed this large red moon just kind of hanging around. It's a bit strange, no? Maybe it's just set dressing. You know, the moon plays a large part in all the games in this series, so it might be something to keep in mind. Lock that away for later. As you explore the castle and read the books and notes left behind, you'll find out that it was no mere accident that Miriam was put to sleep. She was put under a spell to slow down the corruption that spreads as a Shardbinder uses and acquires more shards. In fact, up to this point, the sheer amount of shards you could absorb should have accelerated the corruption inside Miriam, but for some reason, she's unaffected. We find out that Johannes has improved the spell that's keeping Miriam from going full crystal, but he's unsure whether or not it's going to hold. The only person who could help figure that out is Alfred, of whom, if you've made your way to the underground hidden desert, you're gonna fight. He doesn't give you much to go off of, other than he's looking for some book called the Liber Logaeth. Miriam tells him that Jebel was holding some kind of an odd book, and with that, Alfred teleports away. Guess it's back to exploring. After certain key events, if you diligently go back to the village and talk with everybody there, Dominique will probably have some information for you on where you could possibly head next. One of these times, she receives a message arrow from Zangetsu talking about a demon that apparently can fall up. It's a little weird. Zangetsu seems to be seeing a lot of strange things in this castle. But following his word, once you find that demon and take its ability, a ton more of the castle opens up to you, up to and including the Oriental Sorcery Lab. This area is very important. Here you're going to run into Zangetsu again, and just like the first time you met, he's going to fight you, and probably mess you up if you're not prepared for it. When you eventually beat him, he's going to give you his sword. This was a test. He wanted to make sure you were strong enough to be able to face Gremory. He does this because this is the demon that is controlling Jebel, and he knows it. Definitely make sure you equip that sword. Not only is it pretty powerful, but it's needed to unlock the next section of the game. Make your way back to Jebel in his room in the Hall of Termination. Make sure you have Zangetsu's sword equipped. Now, at this point you might be wondering, why did Zangetsu even give this to you? Shouldn't he be strong enough to take out Gremory? And the answer there is yes. However, Gremory knows Zangetsu's out to get her. So, by giving you his sword, you're the last person she expects to be able to take her out, because you're there for Jebel. But if you pay attention, you might just see something that sticks out, and that might be what you need to fight. During your confrontation with Jebel, you're going to go all out, and then you're going to see it. The red moon. What if you hit that with Zangetsu's sword? Well, if you do that, the fight's going to end. Jebel regains himself, just long enough to succumb to the Shardbinder corruption. Gremory was using Jebel to summon more demons, because he was a survivor from that initial ritual a decade ago. He also happened to be the weaker of the two of you. Miriam was taken out of the summoning because her crystal was essentially too powerful. Apparently, Miriam alone accounted for over half the energy needed. So, just imagine, if they brought the world to its knees without Miriam, the devastation that could have happened if she was a part of it. That's something. Jebel goes full crystal, and, well, that's the end for him, but not the journey. As Jebel was fading away, Alfred shows up, grabs the Liber Logaeth, and then teleports out with Gremory in hot pursuit. After a brief interlude in the Hall of Termination, you find out that Dominique has gone missing. You get told to try and track down where Gremory disappeared to, in hopes of trying to find Dominique. You just gotta keep an eye out for anything that kinda seems a little off. Maybe like a red moon or something. If you do happen across that, cleaving it opens up a portal to the Den of Behemoths. I hope you're prepared for this. This area leads to the final zone of the game. Immediately after entering, you're going to encounter Alfred, who was fatally injured by someone. Gremory, maybe? Well, maybe not. Zangetsu's quick to say that it was Dominique. She's been plotting this entire time and was in league with Gremory. They're trying to summon a huge demon named Bale. Zangetsu says he's going to move on ahead to try and trap Gremory. He has an ability to lock down an area and prevent anything and anyone from teleporting. Once you make your way into the Glacial Tomb, you're in the last leg of the game. Did you manage to take out any important books borrowed from OD? Maybe some extremely powerful one that he had a unique dialogue for? No? Well, okay, I mean, we're getting to the end of the game. You might want to consider returning those. And if you don't, well, super boss aside, if you do manage to beat OD, I would highly recommend taking a trip back to his personal library. There's going to be some fancy dialogue there, and OD is going to be sporting some fresh eyewear. Congratulations, by the way, you beat the hardest boss in the game, gained an ability that is straight up just a JoJo's reference, and on top of that, you get to take out every book in the library, so, worth it. After that, though, heading back to the Glacial Tomb, getting past the boss fight with OD, you're going to eventually encounter Gremory. Zangetsu does his thing, and she banishes him to somewhere, or maybe kills him, unclear. It's just you and Gremory now, though. If you do right by Zangetsu and equip his sword, you get to hear his theme play in the background. His sword also just does, flat out, a bunch of damage to Gremory. The music change alone makes it a fun fight, but ultimately that choice is up to you. With Gremory defeated and Zangetsu avenged, it's time to find Dominique and put an end to this. You'll find her in the very bottom of this area after getting Gremory's teleport ability. She's gonna spill the beans and tell you what her plan is and why. As most plots like this go, she did it because her family was wiped out in the initial summoning 10 years ago, so with nothing left to live for, she planned and plotted. She didn't know when or if Miriam would ever awaken, but she got as high up as she could in the church, so she could learn it immediately once she did. Once she found out, all she had to do was work with Gremory, capture and brainwash Jeeble, and use him as a ploy to get to Miriam. She brought in Zangetsu to try and track down Alfred, the only alchemist who could really stop her. While it didn't work out exactly as she thought it would, it did amass enough energy to try and pull Bale into the world. Miriam is now the last hope. The first fight against Dominique is pretty decent. As far as a human boss fight goes, she's probably the most fun to fight. You can't body her easily enough though, and once you do, she's going to open up a rift, brings Miriam into the domain of Bale, and here is the final boss. And it's kind of a letdown, actually. Everything leading up to Bale is pretty tough. All the bosses and even regular enemies can hurt you pretty good, but Bale, that's almost too easy. With Dominique taken out, Alfred and Jeeble gone, and Zangetsu missing in action, Miriam, Johannes, and the rest of the village watch as the castle evaporates away. Johannes tells Miriam that thanks to information gained from Alfred before he passed, that he can, hopefully, over time, suppress the corruption and save Miriam from the same fate that befell Jeeble. As a tribute of sorts to Zangetsu, Miriam plants his sword into the ground, and they both kinda just walk away. And that ends this game and its story. Where does it go from here? Who knows? I would like to see it continue, but I'm not entirely sure how they can continue this story. But, who can say? We can only realistically hope for maybe just a little more. And as a fun little cliffhanger, it's a fairly Zangetsu-shaped shadow on the wall. Welcome to the ending thoughts. For those of you that stuck with it through that entire story section, thanks. Really, you guys are awesome. For everybody else that jumped ahead, well, you're also awesome. And welcome back. Appreciate you being here. This game has its faults for sure. Every game does. But this one has something that most other indie-style games in this genre seems to lack, and to me, that's the feel. When I play something that borrows from the genre, those games always seem to be really good at being those games. But to me, they always feel like they're missing something. I'm not entirely sure what that something is exactly, but if I had to guess, it would be Iga's touch. And really, it's honestly probably the touch of all the old Castlevania devs. I'm glad that Iga was able to pull as many people as he did to be able to work on this. Don't get me wrong, I love all those other games that borrow the genre. Hollow Knight, Guacamelee, Ori. The list is so long and expansive, but this genre has the metroidvania moniker for a reason. And while it's not technically a Vania, Metroid Dread is kind of the same way. All those games borrow from these two specifically, and while they're great, there's just something about the originals that they can't seem to get right. There's just something almost magical about them in a way. As far as my personal list of favorites, while this game does not have Castlevania in the name, it is very much Castlevania. I think it ranks fairly high for me, definitely in, I would say, the top 3, but it does come off maybe a little bloated if you try to do everything. If you try to grind out all the shards and all the crafting, you're gonna be playing this for a while. But man, if that journey isn't worth it in the long run. Plus, add on to that all the replay value you can get, forget it. This game has so many modes and extras, so many secrets and codes. You can and will get your money's worth. I have no doubt about that. Plus, I mean, it's still getting updates and changes from the Kickstarter. That happened almost a decade ago, and oh god, that was almost a decade ago. That is commitment. On a single-player game, no less. If this video does one thing, at least, it should be to encourage you to try this out if you haven't already. If you have, what are your thoughts on it? Do you like the direction? Do you think it fits in with its predecessors? I mean, I know I do. Alright. Tune in next time as we close out this Bloodstained retrospective and take a look at the Kickstarter bonus prequel, Curse of the Moon. I'll see you then. Hey everyone, it's end card time. If you made it this deep into the video, first off, thanks for watching. Things are wrapping up here on this small detour into Bloodstained. The next Castlevania trio of videos will be on the 3DS games, not 3DS, 3DS games that came out, way too long ago. We'll be starting that with Order of Ecclesia, and you'll end up seeing Miriam's progenitor, and honestly my favorite Castlevania heroine, Shanoa. She might very well be right next to Samus in my book, but more on that later. In the meantime, keep it clean out there.